Ugh, the squeaking. Oh! 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 Oh, that's good. Hey guys, and welcome to GTLive. My name's Ash, and today we are dissecting and working our way through John FNAF's official FNAF timeline. He released this last month. It's an hour long, and this is a giant collaborative effort to tell his interpretation of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, at least through Ultimate Custom Night. So I'm here today to figure out, hey, is he right? Are there some things that just don't make sense? And how do I feel about all of this? So without further ado, I think we should just hop, skip, and jump right into this thing. Ooh. The sound design. Together in one place. So, okay, that was Henry at the end. That was FNAF 6 Henry at the end there. Absolutely. What are these other voices? I know the first one had to be Jackie from the Secrets of the Mimic teaser trailer that we saw. Is that supposed to be Elizabeth? Yeah. Together in one place. Okay. Wow.
Five Nights at Freddy's is a franchise with over a decade's worth of content.
This is wild.
Games, books, and now a movie.
Here, actually, let me put on closed captions so that y'all can understand this a little bit better, because I imagine I'm going to be exclaiming quite a good bit throughout this video. So let me put that to the side. This looks fantastic. Oh my gosh, like all the birthday hats and the tables, and oh my gosh, the lights here too. Like John hired on a lot of people to take this on and to make this look splendid. And oh my gosh, the payoff already is huge. This feels like I'm watching like a Netflix documentary. Like I just logged on, I'm sitting on my couch, and I'm watching this full production. And, you know, that's not to glaze John or anything. It's just credit where credit's due. This thing looks good, and it sounds good so far. So let's see this sequence, and then we'll kind of go into the meat of the video. All right,
Whose timeline you watch, they all look different. Making a FNAF timeline is not easy. There are so many ways you can interpret this story, and this is mine. So let's start at the beginning.
70s. I mean, yeah. That's when Edwin is creating the Mimic for his son, David, to entertain him while he's working on animatronics and robots for Fazbear Entertainment, which had bought the business that he was previously working on, right? He sold vacuums. They bought it. Whoa. So I like the ambiguity here. It's a little bit silly because it's like, yeah, the 1970s are now in play, right? Ugh. Let's see what John has to say about this period.
Back in the 70s, a company called Fazbear Entertainment got its start by creating different props and mascot costumes for carnivals, and specifically for something called the Fall Fest. The Fall Fest featured various mascot characters, such as a bird, an elephant, and the most popular of all, Fredbear and Bonnie.
All right, so going back here too, just to provide additional context and the link to what we've seen most recently in the franchise, right? So in the Help Wanted 2 content update, we saw the Mimic wearing kind of an amalgamation of these mascot costumes that you see here, right? The costumes worn from the Fall Fest. And then up here at the front, this is Jackie's box. Jackie is the character that we are calling the kind of clown figure that we saw in the Secrets of the Mimic teaser trailer. It's heavily speculated that she is, in fact, the Mimic. She is like a clownish Jack-in-the-Box sort of figure, right? And then down here we see the kind of groovy pattern rug. So that is all connected to that teaser. Anything on the walls here? I don't know if we brought in any additional posters. Keep your distance up here. And then we got some schematics. Classic. Can't have FNAF without the schematics.
Got its start by creating different props and mascot costumes for carnivals, and specifically for something called the Fall Fest.
Yes, the Fall Fest was also something that was teased in the content update, right? So when we put together the pieces of this puzzle that we found by doing more of the minigames in Help Wanted 2, after you completed the whole game, you would make this puzzle. It would then immediately create this sort of tent fixture, which we said was tied to the Fall Fest in some way, shape, or form. But it looked like there were some kind of like industrial pipes or structures behind it as well. So that seemed to be connected to Edwin and what he was creating. So it seems here from the poster that the Fall Fest started in 1970, but Secrets of the Mimic takes place later in the 70s because of what I said earlier with when the story in the book takes place. What we know about the 70s in relation to this franchise is still pretty vague. Before the Fall Fest, we know there was like a Fred Bear singing show that could have just been a traveling show with a singing bear. We don't really have a lot of context for it. I know Matt theorized that William Afton actually saw this show and then got inspired to start his own business based on watching that bear sing and bringing that joy to other children in the future. That could have been from anywhere from like the 30s to the 60s, that printout advertisement. Maybe we can show that poster here, if that would work. That is what we basically know. General overview about FNAF in the 70s.
The Fall Fest featured various mascot characters, such as a bird, an elephant, and the most popular of all, Fredbear and Bonnie. These specific mascot costumes were so popular, Fazbear Entertainment opened a dedicated restaurant for them called Fredbear's Family Diner, featuring the same Fredbear and Bonnie mascot costumes from the Fall Fest.
Interesting. Okay. John's saying these characters were all involved in the Fall Fest, right? And I think it's important to show the Spotty costume here, right? Where we have the stitches in this costume. It was handmade similar to the stitching that we see in these mascots, right? There's a little bit of distance here. We're further out from them, so it's harder to make out, but you can see the stitching happening here and around the arms, especially up here with the ears and stuff too. Now, a flag here that I would say, I know I'm analyzing what's on the screen right now, but these were created by artists, right? So I'm not looking at the official models and everything. I can't assume that this is like one-to-one the official look of it all, but I think it's helpful to at least look at these while we're making the connections that John was making in this timeline, right?
Popular.
So coming back down here.
Entertainment opened a dedicated restaurant for them called Fredbear's Family Diner, featuring the same Fredbear and Bonnie mascot costumes from the Fall Fest.
I think what Matt said in his game theory timeline was that these two figures actually came in, and that was William Afton's first restaurant, and he designed the Bonnie mascot costume and Fredbear for his first establishment, right? So we're already seeing the divergences here of they actually originated at the Fall Fest, and those were the only two mascots to carry over once we get to our first pizzeria, right? Just interesting call-outs like that.
Fazbear Entertainment didn't account for, though, was one of their animatronics from the Fall Fest going rogue.
Ooh.
Ending in a giant fire, with most of everything from the Fall Fest being destroyed.
Ooh. Oh my gosh! Whoa! Oh my goodness! What? This is like... So... Can't even... Dude. This is like its own show. This is like its own show.
This is dummy good.
Right? Like, the cinematography of it all, too. It's like, I don't even think I can talk here. Because it just feels so official.
Seeing him in the credits as John FNAF makes me laugh every time, too.
Edited by Dan Seibert. That's our guy.
You know that guy.
We know that guy. And then John FNAF.
That's lasting contribution.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, you know, there's so many Johns in the world. And if you just say FNAF, there's for sure going to be people who don't
There's so many FNAFs out there.
Right. So
you
got to put him together. And so his full new legal name is John FNAF.
Absolutely.
Which I think is correct.
Rolls right off the tongue.
And oh my gosh, look how many animators were involved in this too. Like, that is just it's a feat. 2D art by Snartles. I feel like we've seen the name Snartles in a game that we've done recently. I remember calling that one out. So it's cool. I recognize that name. And then voice acting, Upside Haunts, Lewis Dawkins Dawko, and Matt Pat. once we hear his line, do I have the story for y'all about that voice line? So,
Ooh, I don't know when do you know when he shows up here? I have no idea.
If I remember correctly from when I recorded that line with him, I don't think it'll be too deep in.
Okay. Well, everybody keep your ears open and keep watching, because apparently Matt's going to pop up in here, question mark?
Yes. And I couldn't even, like, go back to talk about this with the incredible opening sequence. It's going to come up later, but there is a part about Five Nights at Freddy's that has been driving me absolutely up the wall for the past, like, month. And this image here is the start of it. It's the start of it. I won't keep you here. We'll progress. But I have so many questions about how the Mimic is able to do this versus some of the animatronics that we see down the line and what their capacities and limitations are. We'll get there. We'll get there. But let's not pad this out much longer. Oh my gosh.
The specifics about the animatronic that went rogue and the fire are unknown and will likely be revealed next year in FNAF's next big release. Although we don't know much about how this fire occurred, we do know that after the fire, Fazbear Entertainment started phasing out of the mascot costume era. They needed something new. The two men who helped found Fazbear Entertainment, William Afton and Henry Emily, stepped up to the plate.
This is interesting too, right? So again, drawing comparisons between the game theory timeline and this, right? We had, in Matt's interpretation, a whole kind of competition, butting heads between William Afton's small business, which was like the earliest Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, and then Henry Emily's competing business, which involved the Mediocre Melodies and the introduction of Chica, right? So these were two competing companies, competing establishments in very close proximity that angered William Afton a lot. And then eventually Henry Emily came through, helped William out, they merged together, and then Fazbear as we know it was born, right? So it's interesting to see here John's interpretation of actually they were more of a collaborative effort from the beginning. And maybe with more information about how the Fall Fest was and how that came to be and what that involved, maybe we'll see more of those connections sooner. But it's just cool to see. Like when John said earlier, every timeline is different. You're going to get different interpretations and pulling together of the story, no matter what. It's so cool to see how different these already are at the very beginning. So, yeah, let's see.
William Afton was mostly the businessman of the two, handling all of the money, while Henry was the more creative one, with him being in charge of building most of the animatronics and props for the company.
Yeah, so especially in the books, we see a lot of the tells about the way that Henry designs the animatronics, right? They have very specific structures of the jaw. He is responsible for the creation of the spring locks. And another pattern that we see in a lot of the way that Henry creates these animatronics and robotics, water is a kind of a common issue for things that Henry creates, right? At least that's what we've assumed. So the spring locks are sensitive to movement. They are also very sensitive to moisture. With the security puppet that we see in the diner, in the family diner, that goes out into the rain to find Charlotte Emily, whose deceased body is left behind the establishment. The security puppet goes outside, slowly loses power, and then collapses next to Charlotte, and then Charlotte becomes the puppet, as we know the puppet to be. Afton's like, I would never make my robots that bad with water. They can swim. That's in the Silver Eyes trilogy. He makes a bunch of smooth animatronics swim through a chasm. It seems like he learned from Henry Emily, but at least at the very beginning, yes, William Afton was the logistics one. He had his idea, and then he was like, yes, businessman, let's accelerate this. Henry Emily was the one who was able to create these animatronics and understand robotics in a way that Afton just could not.
With the Fall Fest era of the company coming to a close, they were only left with Fredbear's Family Diner, the standalone restaurant created for the Fredbear and Bonnie characters. In order to replace the mascot versions of Fredbear and Bonnie, Henry went to work on new versions of the characters, eventually creating the new Fredbear and Spring Bonnie.
Oh my gosh, that frame is just haunting. Just the detail in the like that sliding jaw up and down. Again, that's like a Henry Emily robotics tell, but ugh, so creepy. So creepy.
The same characters, but with new designs and new suits. Henry called them spring-lock suits. These suits are able to double as both an animatronic and a suit that the employees could wear. To switch the suit from animatronic mode to suit mode, the employees could use a hand crank to pull back the animatronic parts, leaving room for them to climb inside. The spring locks that were helping to hold back those animatronic parts were very sensitive, though.
Whoop! That's awesome.
With even a little bit of moisture, the spring locks could potentially snap shut, crushing and killing whoever was inside. But if that ended up happening, Fazbear Entertainment had some common sense procedures set in place.
In case that the spring locks come loose while you're wearing a suit, please
hi,
try to
Scott.
maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer experience.
Fred
Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't know. You've always needed like, the horror element of Five Nights at Freddy's, but sometimes you just gotta think about the logic of the people who run these establishments, where it's like, oh, yeah, you know what? Let's not innovate this anymore. If they bleed out, they die. We'll just make them sign some like waiver or paperwork to make it go away. But it's weird to me that under like the general Fazbear Enterprises, we have something like the Mimic, which is this advanced machine learning entity that can mimic and move around on its own. And as we've seen in the story, it can also react and respond and not just mimic, right? We have that high-end technology, but these cranks are busted. Huh? It's one of those things that if you go in too much on it, your brain starts to break, but things like that, just the disconnect between Mimic and Springlock suits when they are just years apart. Wild.
Fredbear's Family Diner ended up being super successful for William and Henry, so much so that other companies tried replicating it. Another company proceeded to rip off Fazbear Entertainment's old mascot characters by creating their own animatronic versions of them. The leader of the group was Ned Bear, a direct copy of Fredbear.
Yeah, so this was, in Matt's eyes, when the timeline came out, this was Henry's company, the Mediocre Melodies. He had this group of people, and then Chica was involved in this lineup, right? So if you go back here, you'll see that each of these animatronics are actually hooked up to an external battery pack. I was always curious about that for the same reasons, right? Like the technological advancements within Fazbear and what that gradual progression was like. It's interesting to see the different placements of not only who owned this business, but also how that factored into the development of the animatronics.
Animatronic versions of them. The leader of the group was Ned Bear, a direct copy of Fredbear, followed by a hippo, an elephant, and a frog.
I think they're all so cute. I'm sorry. That's not like insightful or adding a lot about lore. I just like them. Moving on.
Characters from the Fall Fest, and all with slightly different designs to avoid copyright issues.
Copyright issues coming up more than once, huh? Because game theory, that was the reason why William Afton tweaked the name of the bear to just be, Fredbear and not Freddy, right? It was to avoid possible copyright infringement because of that idea. And here we're seeing from this other business changing the names to not, have a copyright infringement of the Fall Fest. So it's cool to see how just the introduction of the concept of Fall Fest has impacted our earlier understanding of what this timeline is. But yeah, I guess I would want more information on who's behind that, or who we speculate to be behind that.
But while the rival company was able to replicate the designs, they could not replicate Henry's state-of-the-art technology. Their robots were poorly made and had to have giant batteries with exposed wires on stage with them. Naturally, the rival company failed and ended up being bought out by Fazbear Entertainment. With all of the success from Fredbear's Family Diner,
So Fazbear bought them out. Instead of that being Henry's company, it merged, and then when the pizzeria was created, Chica then became part of the group. So because we're still in the Springlock suit era, part of me is wondering, because of all these acquisitions, right? If we were to assume that, yes, this was an external company and Fazbear bought them out and this had nothing to do with Henry, are these acquisitions of things like Edwin's company and, you know, this rival company, is that how we are getting the blueprints to make these technological advancements because of the ideas and the work of people who tried to either compete or do other interesting things with robotics? I'm sure we'll get there, but clearly, like, Fazbear had a lot of money behind it. It was able to run the Fredbear and Friends show in, like, the early 1980s, so clearly, they had some funding to make those big purchases and make those big moves. But I just find it interesting, the whole, like, the acquisition and the merging of these different restaurants and companies and factors, depending on how you interpret the story. I'm just looking into the way that John sees it.
William and Henry decided to branch out and create more characters for a new restaurant. In 1983, William and Henry opened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, featuring Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. With the opening of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, Fazbear Entertainment was experiencing success like they've never seen before.
So, one thing that isn't touched on here is the natural evolution of how Freddy and Bonnie changed. You know, we had our spring locks, our classic gold color spring locks, and now we have the ever debated purple blue Bonnie and our typical Freddy. And then Chica enters the picture, right? It's commonly understood and, you know, acknowledged that Chica is Henry's creation. Maybe we'll get some more information on why they changed the way they did. Let's see.
But with two restaurants now open at the same time, more success also meant more work for William and Henry. The duo were so wrapped up in work that they started neglecting their own families. William was the father of 3 kids, the eldest, Michael, the crying child, and Elizabeth. The crying child has yet to have a 100% confirmed name, so for this video, he will just be called the crying child.
Okay, I originally wanted to stop to talk about that. Since this video has been in production, we have seen more theories come up, most notably Hyperdroid's theory, using the security logbook to determine that the crying child's name might actually be Dave. And that has multiple meanings. It could mean beloved. There's also the biblical implication of, like, David and Goliath. So there are many people now who just decide, yes, the crying child's name is Dave. We saw dual process imply that the crying child was actually Cassidy. So a lot of names here, but John's just keeping it flat crying child. So yeah.
Meanwhile, Henry had 1 kid, a daughter named Charlie. The business partners spent most of their days working, so they both created different ways of taking care of their kids. Henry was the robotics genius, so he used his talents to create a new animatronic to watch Charlie for him. It was
called
the security puppet.
So it's fun to watch this after the content update came out in Help Wanted 2, where one of the most hotly contested things in the community was whether or not Edwin was a parallel to Henry or if they were their own characters, right? And it seems to say that because the Mimic exists now in the games and in the content update, we saw not only the Mimic, but the Tiger Rock white plushie, which is the same plushie that Edwin's child carried around with him, and the Mimic eventually learned to copy how Dave carried his plushie. And so we said, okay, well, that pretty strongly implies that at the very least, the Mimic stories align with the continuity of the games, right? But I see this, and I see the way that Henry is presented here, and I absolutely see where we would make the parallel things, right? Like, oh, we're the robotics and creative mastermind here. I need to make something to watch my kid. I know with Henry Emily, there's always been some ambiguity about, like, hey, does he have a wife? Where's Charlotte's mom? What's going on? And in the Mimic story, we know David's mother died during childbirth, so it's just Edwin and his son. So I see where those things line up, but again, sometimes there's patterns in stories, and patterns don't always mean parallels, right? But it's interesting to see this here, and it's like, oh, yeah, like, that just sticks out to me a lot, right? I also, in this section, I'm kind of missing some of the more of the motivations behind the creation of these restaurants and the relationship between Afton and Henry. Like, yes, one of them is the more logistics based, one of them is more robotics oriented, right? But what's their relationship to each other? There is some kind of attributed narrative as to how people feel about each other, what the conflict is, what they do as a result of that conflict, right? It's just interesting to see. I wonder if we'll get more of that motive later.
This animatronic would sit by the door of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and make sure that Charlie wasn't able to leave the building. This made it so Charlie could play at the restaurant while Henry worked, without Henry having to worry about her leaving the building or getting kidnapped.
Again, that is a very similar motivation that Edwin had with creating the mimic. And ironically enough, his son did pass away from leaving the building and then running out into the street to, you know, go after his, I think it was a ball. Yeah, interesting stuff.
The robot was linked directly to a green bracelet that Charlie was wearing. If Charlie, wearing the green bracelet, tried leaving the building, the security puppet would spring into action. William, on the other hand, was the businessman of the company.
Okay. Again with the green bracelet, right? It makes sense. It's a bright color. It's standing out from a lot of things in that environment, so it's easy for a robot to track onto. Again, it's just like we created this robot years ago that's able to respond to its environment and, you know, mimic and react with like the people and things around it. It's different, but better than when Matt said the security puppet was attached by strings to the diner and was just kind of moving around like that. That would just be a major backslide. And I don't know how to explain that away. So let's see how Afton treated his sons. Spoiler alert, bad.
He cared more about making money, but also saving money. Naturally, he decided to just force his eldest son, Michael, to babysit while he was at work. Michael was mostly in charge of babysitting the crying child. The crying child didn't have many friends, but he did have a close relationship with his plushies. These plushies were of characters from his favorite show, Fredbear and Friends.
Yep, okay, so that's the show that I mentioned earlier and talked about, man, this company has so much money. And it had to have a good deal of money, at least through the late 70s, to acquire Edwin's business, albeit a failing vacuum business, right? Because his vacuums were like going kind of sicko mode around, and they weren't moving around and cleaning the spaces as they should. And so he went, well, that wasn't a whole lot of longevity, but at least a thing worked, right? So, cool.
Fazbear Entertainment's newest cartoon, featuring Fredbear, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. The crying child's favorite character, though, was Fredbear. He especially loved his Fredbear plushie. Although he loved the plushie version of the characters, the animatronics would soon become a different story.
The crying child, part of the bane of my existence. I'll just let it go. Let it go.
While visiting Fredbear's family diner, the crying child saw something that would scar him for the rest of his life. While wandering the restaurant, he walked by the employees only room, where an employee accidentally left the door open. Inside the room was his father, William Afton, helping another employee into a spring Bonnie suit. But through the eyes of the crying child, this looked like someone was literally being stuffed into an animatronic suit.
Yeah, I mean, this is just... Usually when this scene is shown in videos and stuff, right? You don't see the eyes popping out of this Fredbear suit. He just looks so wide-eyed. I don't know. I don't know why that's getting me right now.
Through the eyes of the crying child, this looked like someone was literally being stuffed into an animatronic suit.
Right.
The crying child was so young that he wasn't educated on how the mascot characters worked.
Right, you don't get educated on that until you're at least 9 years old. As everyone knows, I very clearly remember my Springlock unit back in the 4th grade, early 4th grade, of course. It was one of those introductory units. Once I learned what pronouns was, which obviously that was very influential for me, we went right into the Springlock unit. That's funny to me and me alone. No one else reacted in the room.
I'm locked in over here.
You are locked in. Are you spring locked in though? Or was that 4th grade?
Once I start sweating, once some moisture comes, then the spring locks are about to snap.
Then you'll be spring locked in.
Perma
spring locked.
Yeah.
All right.
R.I.P.
Rip. What time is it? Or how much time do we have?
It's 2:41.
How long have we been going?
42 minutes.
Oh my god, we're 6 minutes in.
Yeah. So you're about 10 10% of the way through, so this is only going to be a 400-minute video, which is what, only like 4 hours?
Oh no.
You're on pace.
I am on pace. You're so right.
4xing the length of a video is short for GTLive.
That's true. The formula is still in place right now. And, you know, we haven't really been doing the banter. So it's just kind of like unadulterated reacting to Five Nights at Freddy's and then praying that I sound competent. So
yeah, this is a good pause.
Yeah.
Here, we'll do, this is a joke break. Ready? Knock, knock.
Who's there?
I should have come up with a joke. Tune in to next time's joke break to get the rest of the joke.
Da da da! Oh my god. I should just proceed with this then, huh?
Whatever your heart desires, within reach.
Within reach.
My heart desires a nice slice of pizza, but I can't get that.
No, I mean, we're talking a lot about pizza, or at least pizzerias.
And I just watched a YouTube short on here about pepperoni pinwheels.
Are you not monitoring the technological equipment, Sam?
I have 2 eyes. One can monitor the technological equipment, and one can watch a YouTube short about a guy who just made pepperoni pinwheels.
I don't think eyes work that way.
I'm built different.
I clearly. Let's go back into this.
Human be put inside of one terrified him. When a child experiences something traumatic, their brain naturally tries finding ways to deal with that trauma. The crying child's way of dealing with his trauma was by creating an imaginary friend.
Which feels logical, you know? It's so hard to explain the way that the crying child, at least for me, interacts with the Fred plushie. There's been theories about whether or not the Fred plushie is just a way for Afton to talk to the crying child, but I don't think it isn't fair game to just say that, hey, this kid is traumatized by something that he saw because he doesn't understand it, and sometimes the most logical way to think is the scariest way to think, which sounds crazy out of context, but when you're a kid and you don't understand what's happening here, like John called out with the spring locks, yeah, they're getting stuffed into a giant, pointy, metallic body. That sucks. So, as much as I have always looked at the crying child a little bit confused, I am much more on the boat of my boy has trauma and he has an imaginary friend, because that's how kids work. That's how kids work. All that to say, I'm with it.
This imaginary friend took the form of the object he loved the most, his Fredbear plushie. His new imaginary friend Fredbear followed him wherever he went, shape-shifting into flowers, hiding behind cars, and in the sewers, with nobody being able to see him except for the crying child.
And another reason I like the trauma explanation for this versus like, oh, it's a vessel of communication from Afton is precisely because of this, right? If we're going to talk about trauma and symbolism, it's something that is very difficult to get away from, and it feels like you're being reminded of it everywhere that you go. So to have that always there and lingering in some way, shape, or form, but it's only you that feels that way, or only you that can see it, or be reminded of it, or be impacted by it in some way, then yeah, this feels like it checks out a lot more. It could also be, on the flip side, representative of Afton always having some kind of eyes, or Willie A having some kind of eyes on the crying child, but I am more inclined to believe, whether it be through narrative cohesion or just what we see here and how the plushie interacts with the crying child prior to the crying child's death, I'm inclined to believe it's more of like a trauma-based imaginary friend thing. Kids having kid behaviors. Whoa.
The crying child was overwhelmed, the plushie would talk to him and try to calm him down. Even when the plushie wasn't around, it was still able to speak to him because it lived in his mind. While the crying
Hold on. Some of the dialogue here is interesting.
Child was overwhelmed, the plushie would talk to him.
You know he's hiding
try
again.
to calm him down.
Right? That's in relation to Michael trying to scare him.
Plushie wasn't around.
He left without you. He knows
was
that you
still
hate it
able
here.
to speak to him because it lived in his mind.
You're beside the exit. If you run, you can make it.
While the crying child was
yeah, I mean, there is a world where that could be, like, I absolutely see how that could be Afton monitoring and, like, talking to him and trying to impact him, but, like, I just don't see a motive for that at all. If Charlotte is not dead, I don't see a motive.
Dealing with the trauma of seeing what he thinks was someone being stuffed into a suit, his brother Michael was only making it worse. Michael knew about what happened with his younger brother and used it against him. Every day while babysitting the crying child, Michael would put on a Foxy mask, hide somewhere in the house, and jump scare his...
The 8-bit minigames in the arcade machine. That's cool. That's cool. That's a lot of buttons. I'm overwhelmed by the amount of buttons on this arcade cabinet, but that's very cool. Oh! Whoa. This is a really cool rendition of the Afton house, just gotta say.
From the pizzeria to your living room, you no longer have to wait to sing and dance with Fredbear and Friends.
Woo!
7 Central, only on...
That's so cool. That's so cool. Oh my gosh. Ugh. Oh. Older brothers are the worst, man. My friends' older brothers when I was a kid, they were always doing this stuff to me. Literally always. Also, just to note, again, with the plushie, why does he look so scary? I don't know. Why did we decide that stuff for kids back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s all had to be creepy looking? I was so scared of Alf. I don't know if y'all have seen Alf. Alf creeped me out so bad. This was a show before my time, but I remember thinking, like, we did this? Like, we made this choice for kids? I don't know. It is kind of the catalyst for horror like this, but sometimes you see it and you go back to that original thought of, like, why did we do that? Why are they all scary? Here, go past it.
Michael's bullying, the crying child's imaginary friend Fredbear would comfort him and talk him through the situation, saying, "You know he is hiding again. Be careful. Tomorrow is another day." Michael wasn't the only one bullying the crying child, though. The local kids in the neighborhood heard about why the crying child was so scared of the pizzeria, even making up fake rumors related to what the crying child thought he saw there. "You'd better watch out. I hear they come to life at night. And if you die, they hide your body and never tell anyone." But all of this
It's so cruel. Here, let me go back a minute. You know, he's hiding again. Be careful. Tomorrow is another day. Again, the ongoing debate, right? Some of this stuff it feels so all-knowing, right? It feels like someone comforting a kid, and can a kid create those? Can a kid at the crying child's age create those thoughts to comfort himself, rather than just, like, be absorbed by his fear? It takes an interesting sense of maturity. By the same token, there's, like, the hyper alert and awareness that you have when you are traumatized, right? When you're in a fight or flight response. So I could also see that being connected to that state of being. It's just like, it's one of those things, man. It's one of those things.
Why the crying child was so scared of the pizzeria, even making up fake rumors related to what the crying child thought he saw there.
And Fredbear's always witnessing
they come to
it.
Life at night. And if you die, they hide your body and never tell anyone. But all of this bullying would come to a head on one special day, the crying child's birthday. Ironically, his
that was
birthday
cool.
party
That was a cool transition.
being held at Fredbear's family
50.
diner. Because he was so terrified of being at the pizzeria, he hid under the table, not knowing that Michael and his friends were nearby, planning a prank that would go terribly
Oh
wrong.
my gosh. Oh, we get to see it.
Make sure you grab your pizza. Fred Bear and Spring Bonnie will be performing in 5 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, so
Sounds like such a goober.
right? This was recorded. Oh my goodness. It was closer to the end of Matt's time doing YouTube Shorts. At the top of January 2024, that's when the other hosts started going on Shorts and performing their own Shorts, right? Just to kind of like introduce them to people. Towards the end, Matt and I were in front of the big green screen that we had, and I was wrapping up and getting things struck down from the last Shorts that he was doing, right? And Matt goes, "Oh, can you keep everything set up for a minute? I think I have to record something for John." And I was like, for John? Are we doing Shorts for John? No. Just a line for a video he's doing. And I was like, oh, okay. Cool. So I get rid of the camera, and I just set up the audio interface for him to record. He looks at his phone. Matt's looking at his phone, and he's very serious about it. He's like, okay. I hit the record button, and then I just see him go, "Grab your pizza," and he just goes completely in the zone. And I, in this attic, have to like hold my breath and step away as I watch this man lock in. It's a pretty big space, right? But at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of padding up there. I mean, honestly, we never got that much padding up there. Whoops. But if I were to speak in the background, almost certainly it would get picked up. So I was fighting for dear life while Matt went into this. And it's fun and silly to see that here in its full context when I saw Matt up in the attic, one sock on, one sock off, delivering this line, going absolutely all in. So, yep, that's the image that plays in my brain when I hear this line. There's your story. I hope it was worth it.
I think it was worth it.
You think so? Okay.
I'm amused. I've never heard that story before.
Oh, yeah. It was a great time.
I bet.
Yeah. Oh my god. Sorry.
Anything you care to share with the class?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Is this bad news?
No,
You don't have to share it with the class.
No, it's really good.
Okay.
Oh my god. I'm trying really hard. I'm trying
You
really hard.
don't have to try. Do we want to just take a break? We're at 3:00 now. We can take a little break. You can do whatever you got to do. You can have your meeting. We can all regroup and
Yeah.
finish the rest of this.
Just found out my aunt is cancer-free.
That's pretty epic.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Oh my god. Oh my god. It's a big day. It's a big day. All right. Hey, howdy. We're back. It's a different day, as you could probably tell. After I got all that news, I needed a little bit of time to process all of that. And yeah, it was a great time. All of us here in the room, we popped these like poppers. They didn't really pop. It was more like these paper things that tore apart, and there was no boom or anything. But from mine, I got this little purple crown that came out there. So I was wearing this all of yesterday after I found out. So it was very fun. It was very fun and cool. But I wanted to come back to this. We hit around an hour, I think, with the previous video, and only like 10-ish minutes in. So I wanted to come back here, go a little bit further, and then hopefully lead us into a part 2 and see if we can make any more progress. As I understand, I am pausing quite a bit because there's so much here to talk about, man. So it's interesting to see these timeline comparisons as I am making sense of the lore and figuring out just what exactly I believe. So we're on this journey together. It's fun and cool. So here I am. I'm putting this up to 1.2 speed. So not too much faster, but just a little bit so we could hop to some of the bigger points a little bit faster. Hopefully we can get to I'm hoping 13, 15 minutes. We'll see. So let's get back on into it.
Grab your pizza. Fredbear and Spring Bonnie will be performing.
Hello, Matthew.
In 5 minutes.
Oh, the squeaking. Oh! 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 Oh,
Michael and
that's
his friends
good.
lifted the crying child up to, quote, give Fredbear a big kiss, and Fredbear bit down on him, leaving his body to go limp. Michael and his friends quickly stopped laughing. Because of Michael's immature behavior, his terrified younger brother paid the ultimate price. Although the crying child was badly hurt, he didn't immediately die. Because of the immense brain damage, he slipped into a coma. After being treated at a hospital, the crying child was taken home so he could be comfortable, surrounded by his...
Okay, with the crying child, right? The delineation of he did not die in the hospital. We know that he didn't die immediately during the bite. We know he went into a coma. So with the FNAF 4 bedroom, right? We see pill bottles. There's also an IV drip in that bedroom. So it would make sense if he was taken from the hospital and brought to his home just to be like more comfortable and with like his family, who, albeit like extremely wrong to this child, then I could see that making sense. And I assume that we would then get the voice lines from Michael and William Afton delivered to him in his bedroom.
Only friends,
Buffer.
his plushies. In the crying child's final moments, Michael decides to apologize for what he's done, saying, "Can you hear me? I don't know if you can hear me. I'm sorry." After Michael speaks, the crying child's imaginary friend Fredbear, created out of the trauma he experienced, continues doing what it's done the whole time. It comforts him, saying, "You're broken. We are still your friends. Do you still believe that? I'm still here. I will put you back together."
Okay, so we're saying that that's the plushie? That's Fredbear plushie? Because going back here, hold on, mute it really quick. I just want to call out the text color is different, right? So I will put you back together. It's in this like, it's a whitish color, and I could see a slight yellow hue, but what's happening over here, oh my gosh, if it would let me get there, please, please let me get there. If it would go back, all of these other text boxes are in a much more obvious yellow color. Yeah, this. So yes, this is an overlay, so it's going to be less saturated, but in its full saturation and opacity, these are more of a yellow. I feel like if it was the same speaker of this imaginary friend, I don't think it would be that. I would push back on that point. I feel like there's a higher chance that it's Afton and the voice is being filtered through the understanding of Fredbear, right?
You back together. This would be the final thing the crying child hears before he dies.
Right? Like, especially I will put you back together as being like the catalyst for the remnant experiments and trying to find like how to bring back life. So I do think this is William Afton. I do think it's Afton.
The crying child's spirit would then live on in the Fredbear suit, the thing that took his life. The crying child's death wasn't just an accident. It was directly caused by Michael's recklessness.
This too, right? And, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, story-wise, I can see it. Logically, meh. I don't know. The fact he didn't die during the bite makes it hard for me unless he ends up back in the suit somehow. We know that these spirits of the possessed kids can move around. We know they can be moved because of Charlie, like giving life to the animatronics. And this ties into the whole thing that happened last year of like the two spirits inside of Golden Freddy. They're both in there? Just having a fun time? Not the fun times, but a fun time? It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. It's almost like this series is really hard to theorize about, but you have to create these narrative structures to make the story feel satisfying. But it also opens up the door for more criticism because by creating a narrative, you just instinctually have to make, you know, larger stretches to make stories work. That's the fun of it. That's also the difficult part of it. So that's how I feel.
This is something that Michael could potentially face jail time for. So it needed to be covered up since the crying child was being kept.
I mean, yes. I just like how different the world could have been if Michael Afton went to jail. That's awesome.
At home, no one else knew that he ended up passing away. So William and Michael ended up burying the crying
Okay.
child's body in the middle of the woods where no one would find him. No tombstone, no flowers, just a pile of dirt,
Ooh.
an unmarked grave, and a lifetime's worth
Afton
of
wearing
guilt that
plaid?
Michael would have to live
Plafton? Is that Plafton up there? Sorry. Is this Plafton right now?
would have to live with. Shortly after the incident,
That's a cool
Fredbear's
transition,
Family
though.
Diner was quickly shut down, and Fredbear was completely wiped from existence. The Fredbear and Friends TV show turned into Freddy and Friends on tour. The Fred
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot, actually. That feels good. That feels great. It's interesting that, again, I find the TV shows to be such a, like, yeah, this was a whole thing. And then we don't really hear about it all that much because it's so suggestive of there being a lot of money in this franchise and it being profitable to a wider scale than presumably where these locations were opening up, right? Like, if this was on a local broadcast channel, even, I still feel like that's a lot of reach and that's a lot of time and resource to create these sorts of animations. I don't know. I feel like there's something there. I feel like it's something there. But I like the full shift and rebrand as, you know, the Family Diner kind of goes into obscurity because of the bite, and then this other pizzeria and this new character, this new cast can come forward.
Fredbear and Spring Bonnie Springlock suits also ended up being moved into the back room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, mainly being used as spare suits if one of the Freddy's animatronics broke down. The death of William Afton's youngest son was a pivotal moment in this story, specifically William Afton's story. This was the first domino to fall. A father losing his son is a traumatic situation, and while any other father would take time to grieve, be sad, and properly deal with such a big loss, William Afton took a different route. Afton definitely was upset about his son dying, but it wasn't because he felt bad for his son, it was because it was embarrassing to him.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I'll let you finish.
Afton was a narcissist. He had little to no empathy. All he cared about was work and comparing himself to his business partner, Henry.
Okay, here we go. Yes. So, earlier on, yesterday, whatever I said yesterday, gee whiz. Yesterday I called out the fact that in this specific timeline, we were getting a little bit less of the character motivation and who these people were versus just like the actions that they were doing, right? So here we're seeing more of a fleshed out version of Afton and who we see him to be. It's like, okay, yes, now we are pulling together more of those narrative elements to try to contextualize some of these pieces of evidence that are sprinkled throughout this timeline. Yes, I like seeing more of this.
Henry had a wife, a kid, and a talent for robotics that Afton was utterly jealous of. The death of the crying child sent Afton over the edge because while Henry's family was still perfect, his was now broken. Henry and William had different ways of taking care of their kids. And while Afton employing his eldest son failed, Henry's security puppet succeeded. Henry's daughter, Charlie, lived on. Afton
Okay, that's interesting. Like, the comparison angle is interesting because it's also, again, one of Henry's creations, the security puppet, was successful, but Henry's engineering on Fredbear and the Springlocks, unsuccessful, right? That led to a death. The other was purely protection. So it could also be a point of comparison of, you know, Henry's creations protected his own, but inadvertently killed the crying child. From a story perspective, I absolutely see a world where Afton points blame at Henry. I really do.
Afton had a hard time dealing with this feeling of embarrassment. He started becoming an alcoholic, frequently visiting the local bar called Junior's. One night, though, after drinking a little too much and getting kicked out of the bar, he decided that he was going to settle the score with Henry. Afton, drunk and filled with rage, drove from the bar to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where he knew Charlie was being watched over by Henry's security puppet. Afton planned on risking everything to kill Henry's daughter, Charlie. He didn't care if he got caught, and he didn't care if he went to prison. But when Afton got to Freddy's, he noticed that Charlie was standing outside by herself.
Would he not care?
It turned out that some bullies were able to trap the security puppet in its box and lock Charlie outside the building, giving Afton the perfect opportunity to kill Charlie outside of the pizzeria.
Okay. Again, little narrative features here, right? So we know that bullies were part of both of these kids' deaths. The bullies being Michael and Bonnie Bro, and insert fun and spicy names for people with the Freddy and the Chica mask. And then the bullies that obscured and tried to hide the security puppet, right? So bullies contributed to both deaths. The other part of that, Henry creating the spring lock mechanics, you know, that failing, would have him partially responsible for the death of crying child. On the other side, with Charlie's death, Afton is literally the one to take her and kill her because of what the bullies did, right? So literally, straight down the middle, bullies, and then one of the co-founders. I'm not saying Henry's a murderer because his spring locks led to and contributed to the passing of the crying child, but I am saying that I think Afton would cast blame on Henry for that and see this as revenge. I see that more as a driver than embarrassment, but I also get it if we're looking at this through the lens of wanting to be superior to Henry and feeling like optically, publicly, that he was somehow responsible for his own kid's death, if that makes sense.
Security puppet was eventually able to escape its box and went looking for Charlie. As Afton sped away,
creepy.
the puppet noticed that Charlie was outside in the pouring rain. It then did what it was programmed to do and went to protect her.
Aww.
But as the puppet got closer to Charlie's
That's
body...
cool. That's cool, actually. Charlotte Emily, age, gender, parent, Henry Emily. Just parent, and then wristband color green, right? So there's no facial tracking here. It's literally just locked onto the wristband, and then it was probably programmed in like, hey, this is the other information about this kid. But I like that as the rain comes down, we see ERR, and that is, I believe, the same font that we see in one of the FNAF 3 minigames, where Shadow Freddy is leading away the animatronics in the pizzeria for William Afton to take them apart, right? So when they're trying to go into the room, because each of these locations has a room that cannot be accessed by the animatronics, and so they try to go into this room to follow Shadow Freddy, it does not work. It says error in the bottom left corner, and then we see Purple Guy taking apart the animatronics, but because he's 8-bit, it's just kind of him doing this, and it's like, oh, it's creepy and it's spooky. But also, when you just isolate the animation, it's a little bit silly. So, nice touch. Good touch. I like it.
It was forced to crawl its way over to her until the rain got to be too much, and the puppet shut down right next to Charlie's body. While Charlie and the puppet lay lifeless next to each other, Afton was speeding home, driving right past where he buried his son and the bar he got kicked out of. When Afton got home, he was met with his wife sitting in the living room watching TV, and Michael in his bedroom. Afton was a drunk and abusive father, and fully blamed Michael for what happened to his youngest son. Michael was so upset by what he did to his brother that he would sometimes see visions of Fredbear appear and disappear. Tonight, Fredbear appeared outside his bedroom window, and it almost felt like his brother was calling out to him from beyond the grave. This would happen frequently, and every time it did, Michael would run to the spot where they buried his younger brother, only to find that nothing had changed. His younger brother was still gone and buried in the ground. Afton knew Michael did this often, saying, "Ran off to that place again. He will be sorry when he gets back." The guilt of killing his younger brother haunted Michael in his real life, but also in his dreams. Michael would constantly have nightmares about the animatronic that took his brother's life. These were the exact same nightmares his younger brother used to have every night, now passed on to him.
Ugh. A little traumatized family. Now we're in. Ugh. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh! Oh my gosh! Oh, those nightmares are good! They're bad. Don't have nightmares, but they're good! Ugh! Ugh! Oh!
After
Oh! Oh, that's... So that was a fair swath of time from the 1970s to 1983, right? And it's been fun to, again, take like, okay, this is what game theory said, this is what John said. These are the questions that I'm having based on the way that we are presenting this information, right? I don't know how I feel, actually, about Henry getting blamed, or maybe Afton holding some resentment towards Henry because of the spring locks. It might just be more resentment. I feel like that's super plausible. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's been fun to get into more timelines and people's interpretations of the franchise as I've been going through all of the books and the games on my own. So I'm by no means a FNAF expert, but I am a FNAF questioner and soft investigator. So take that with a grain of salt, and I'm always interested to see what your thoughts are on John's timeline, any remaining thoughts from the game theory timeline, and what you think generally. I get excited by this sort of conversation, so let me know what you think in the comments. And yeah, I think one more thing before I let you go, just one more thing. I'm actually really happy that I was able to learn the news that my aunt's free from cancer on camera and on the couch and in this space with you all. I am so happy to have that moment on film forever. It's really very cool, and it feels very special to me. I'm really happy that I got to share it with you as well. And you know, there's something awesome about having a team of people who, upon hearing, you know, something cool that happened in your life and just a great relief for your family and a cause for celebration, pop a bunch of poppers with you, right? So, with this special moment, I kind of wanted to bring this energy to the set, because for me, GTLive has a lot of those very real moments. You know, it's just kind of me existing. There's no script. There's no, you know, there's no pre-planning, really. It leaves a lot of room for life to happen, I guess. And this was a really special moment for me, and I want to keep that on the set. So I was thinking a little bit before filming this second part where I might want to put it, and I think I got it. I think I know where I want it to go. So give me 1 second. And Aunt Julie, I love you. Congratulations. I am so glad that you're okay. Okay. So, because of the camera angle, it looks a little off. So, it does actually fit under there pretty perfectly. I'll just have to scooch it to the side a little bit. 1 second. Yeah, I think that looks really cool. So, with that, I think that looks pretty darn good. Thank you all so much for watching, always. And remember, this wasn't a live stream, but it was a video. A video for you. See ya.